The reason I talk about Henry David Thoreau in the book, who seems to be really an unlikely digital philosopher, because his reputation is that he ran away from civilization and ran away from technology when he built his cabin at Walden Pond, and he's, in the stereotype, he's the great escape artist. But in fact, Thoreau was not escaping civilization at Walden, and the reason I use him is that he built that cabin as an experiment in striking a balance, not in disconnecting, but in putting himself just a short distance from civilization and going back and forth a lot to see if he could make that work. He was a very short walk from the village of Concord, Mass., where he spent most of his life. He was back and forth all the time. He entertained as many as 30 people in that little cabin at one time during the 2 years that he wrote the famous Walden. So he was, in many ways, like us, trying to wrestle with, in his time, the new connectedness, which was the telegraph, the railroad, all these devices that were making life busier and more hectic. And his basic message that I think is so valuable today is that we all need to set up these zones where we're relatively less connected, where we can go back inward and sort of take all that outward richness that we're pulling in and do something with it, do something fresh and creative with it. He has a wonderful quote where he says, another issue in his time, in Thoreau's time, was, believe it or not, addiction to the post office, to checking your mail too often. And he says, Thoreau writes at one point, in proportion as a man's inward life fails, he goes back more desperately and constantly to the post office. And he adds, you can be sure that the man who walks away with the greatest number of letters has not heard from himself in a long time. It's a wonderful sort of diagnosis of what we're facing today. The more addicted you are to that outward connected life, the less you're getting out of it inwardly. And it's just a matter of striking a healthier balance. So that's one of the reasons I use Thoreau as a sort of wonderful example of finding those zones where we can strike a better balance for ourselves.